Today I'll be showing you how to perform a modified McMaster fecal egg count to look at the parasite load of small ruminants. There are only a couple of things that you need to do this procedure. The first is some fresh feces from your sheep or your goat. We need approximately 4 grams or 10 to 12 pellets. We also need a scale in which you can measure out 4 grams of feces. We need a microscope slide. This is a special microscope slide that you can purchase from vetslides.com, and it actually has a green grid. They're a little bit more expensive than the normal microscope slides, but this is how we can actually quantify the number of eggs that your animal has. You need a tea strainer, a couple of plastic cups or Dixie cups would work fine, an eyedropper or a pipette or a small syringe. You'll also need saturated salt water. Now you can buy this commercially. It's called Fecal, or there might be some other names. I make it myself using Morton's canning and pickling salt. I just buy a 2-pound box at the grocery store, and then I can make up enough solution to say do almost 200 samples for just a couple dollars. The most important thing that you're going to need is a microscope. This microscope should have the ability to go to 100x magnification. Now usually 10x will be in the eyepiece and 10x will be in the objective, so you'll get to your 100x magnification. It helps if the microscope has a light that illuminates from the bottom, and it has a movable tray that you can slide your slide into. All right, so now that we have all of our supplies, I will show you how to get started and do your modified McMasters fecal count. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and start the McMasters procedure. The first thing that you're gonna need is some fresh feces from your sheep and goat. If you can't get it directly before you're gonna be doing this procedure, you can get it a few days ahead of time as long as you keep it refrigerated. If it's left out at room temperature or hotter, then the eggs that are actually in the feces will hatch out and you won't be able to see them under your microscope. All right, so we're gonna take our scale, and what I do is I will tare it for whatever cup that I'm gonna be using to measure into, just so I know that I'm going to actually put 4 grams of feces in there. So the scale is tared with that cup on it at 0, and I'll use a tongue depressor or a plastic knife or something else disposable to measure out 4 grams. Sometimes they come out as nice pellets, but if your animals are eating really good forage or a lot of grain, it may come out in a more solid form. So I've got 4 grams of feces on my scale and in my cup. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add 26 milliliters of my saturated salt solution. Okay, so I had that measured out in this graduated cylinder, and I poured it into this cup. There is another way, though, that you can do this, and that involves this kit that you can buy from vetslides.com. And it comes with 2 mixing vials, 2 syringes, and 2 slides. So you actually have all the equipment that you need to do your fecal egg count. So if I didn't want to do it the way that I showed you, I could actually fill up this mixing vial with 26 milliliters of saturated salt solution, and then I could add enough feces to displace the water to get the line up to 30 milliliters. So if you don't have a scale, then you can definitely get one of these mixing vials and do it that way. So after I take the feces, I weigh out the feces and I add the saturated salt solution to it, I'm going to use my tongue depressor, and I'm going to mix it up to break up all of the large clumps of feces that are in there to release the eggs into the solution. You may ask, why are we using salt solution instead of just regular water? The salt solution will actually cause the eggs to rise in the solution. So they'll be near the top, and then when we pipette the solution into the slide, they will rise to the top of the slide, and it will be easy for us to see them. All right, so we have our solution that is all broken up, and now it is liquefied. The next step is we are going to move down here, and we are actually going to pour that solution into our tea strainer, and we're going to let it sit for a couple of minutes. Our goal is to keep all of the solids at the top of the strainer and collect all the liquids at the bottom. So you can stop right. All right, so our fecal solution has sat in the strainer for several minutes, and we now have a fecal ball in the top, the solid material in the top of the strainer, and then the liquid in the bottom. So what we're going to do is we're going to discard the solid material into the trash, and then we're going to work with our liquid. Now generally what I'll do is I will let this liquid sit for a few more minutes to let the air bubbles dissipate out of it. You could immediately pipette it into your slide, but you're going to see a lot of air bubbles in your slide, and then that might get confusing to you and your students. So after a few minutes, I will take the pipette or the syringe or the eyedropper that you have, and I will stir up the solution. Because I used to do this for parasite research trials, our protocol called for stirring it up 20 times. So after you stir up 20 times, you will take your pipette or your syringe or your eyedropper, and you will draw up the solution from the very top of the liquid. Because the salt water is making the eggs float, they should be at the top. The next part takes a little practice, but we're actually going to depress the pipette and then fill up those grid lines. I make it look pretty easy. Takes a little practice. If you get an air bubble in your slide, sometimes you can't get the air bubble out, so you may just have to discard that side and start over. But we are going to count the eggs in both sides of the slide. So after you fill up the left side, you will stir again 20 more times, just for consistency's sake, and then you will draw up the solution again from the top and put it in the slide. Now the trick is you have to hold the slide slightly at an angle so that the liquid falls into the crevice, but it doesn't come out the bottom. So then when you have both of your grids full with fecal solution, you can then put it under the microscope. All right, once both of your sides of your slide are filled up, you can look at it under the microscope. And again, this is going to be at 100x. So what you're going to do is you're going to start at the top left-hand corner of that grid, and then you are going to move your mechanical stage up and down so that you can count each of the eggs that are in each of those grid lines. And that's really important to get a number, because then you will be able to actually quantify how many parasites the animal has. So I look into the eyepiece and I want to focus it until I can see those green grid lines pop up. When I see the green grid lines pop up, I know I'm at the right depth in the slide, and then I can fine tune it in order to see those parasite eggs. So some of the eggs that you might see under the microscope slide at 100x would be considered trichostrongyle type eggs. Now within this category fall the barber pole worm or the Homunculus contortus. This is the one that we are really concerned about causing them anemia. But if you look, there's an Ostertasia egg, as well as some others that look the same, Trichostrongylus, the nodular worm. They all have an oval appearance, So it's really hard to distinguish which one we're looking at under the microscope. So when we do these counts, we are just basically counting anything that looks like these and calling them trichostrongyl type worms. You might also see some tapeworm segments or some tapeworm eggs. So if they are either square or triangle shaped and they have a thick border around the outside, then those would be considered tapeworm eggs. Looking at the bottom of the chart, you may also see some coccidia. This chart is a little confusing in the fact that the coccidia are usually not that dark. They're actually clear and they're more oval shaped than they are they're more circular than they are oval. And over here to the left, we're going to see a whipworm. Kind of looks like a red football with plugs on the ends. Now, if you pick up the feces off of the ground because the animal defecated and then you go and picked it up, you may also see mite eggs in your microscope slide, because as soon as that feces hits the ground, mite eggs might be on it from the grass or the soil. You might also see pollen. Pollen actually looks like a Mickey Mouse head. It has a round head and then the two Mickey Mouse ears. So if you pick up the feces from the ground, you may see pollen as well.